Good evening, members. Good evening, everybody. I'd just like you to remain standing. I'd like to introduce to you Mr. Ajit Singh Saluja, a member of Basingstoke Sikh Society, and to start this evening's meeting with a thought for the day.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to begin with a couple of quotes from Sikh gurus. I've forgotten to speak ill or think ill of everyone, ever since I found the company of the holy. No one is my enemy, nor is anyone stranger to me. I get on with one and all, and neither do I call myself good, nor I see anyone bad. Both of these quotes highlight the good in all people, in turn promoting interfaith harmony and considering all humans as equal. We're all here for the good of the residents of Basingstoke and Dean, regardless of their backgrounds. We all have a role in strengthening and empowering people to enhance community cohesion and to celebrate who they are, making Basingstoke a great place to live and work. This was particularly evident during the pandemic when community groups and individuals from within a borough came together to support one another and continue to do so. Amongst the challenges in current society, we all need to take the time to listen and reflect, respecting the views of other members of the community to make fair decisions for the benefit of all. Sat Shri Akal.
And just before we sit down, I'd just like to mention one thing, and just mention that the sad passing of former councillor Pam Looney. She was a former member in Norden and in Brighton Hill. She was a lovely lady. Please be seated. Before we start, I know it's fairly air-conditioned in here, but please feel relaxed and remove ties or jackets as you see fit. I'm the only one here that can't take his jacket off, unfortunately. Anyway, apologies for absence. I have recorded here at the moment Councillors Tustain, Lee, Faulkner, Williams and Vokes. Are there any others? Councillor McCormack.
Councillor Grant, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bound.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Rattigan and Councillor Golding.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest on any matters on the agenda tonight? Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On the question on the order paper regarding council assets, I have a declaration of interest. I am a trustee of the Oakridge Hall for All.
Thank you very much. Councillor James. Laura James.
On the matter of the same question, I am the chair of the Hall for All, so I need to declare an interest.
Thank you very much. Councillor Fillimore.
On the same question, Mr. Mayor,
Would you like to stand, please?
Yeah, of course I will, sir. On the same question, I'm the trustee of the registered charity Overton Recreation Centre.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bound.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to declare my interest for exactly the same item, I'm an employee of Brooksdown Community Association.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm a trustee at the Oakridge Hall for All and also a member of Oakridge West.
Thank you very much. No more? Thanks very much. Minutes of the meetings held on the 12th of May 2022 and 19th of May 2022. The Chair, I'm going to move that the minutes of the meeting be signed. The only part of the minutes that can be discussed is their accuracy. Is that agreed? That is agreed. Thank you very much. Right, announcements. This may take a while. This hasn't been done for about 3 or 4 years, but it's the announcements for public service. And I'm going to run through a list of councillors, and there's a short description of their service to this council. The actual record of service will be posted in the mail to these particular councils. But to get it on the record, I will read it into the record now. I'm going to start with Sean Dillow. With grateful thanks for his public service as a member of Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council for the Winklebury and Manydown ward for 1 year. Grant Donahue. With grateful thanks for his service as a member of Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council for the Popley ward for 1 year. Lucy Follett Maitland. With grateful thanks for her public service as a member of Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council for the Whitchurch, Overton and Leverstoke ward for 1 year. Simon Mahaffey. With grateful thanks for his public service as a member of Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council for the Pamber and Silchester and Bramley ward for 3 years. Derek Mellor. With grateful thanks for his public service as a member of Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council for the Tadley and Pamber ward for 1 year. Geoffrey Poland. With grateful thanks for his public service as a member of Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council for the Tadley North, Kingsclear and Borghurst ward for 1 year. Tristan Robinson. With grateful thanks for his public service as a member of Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council for the Sherburn St John and Sherburn St John and Rooksdown wards for 6 years. Carolyn Waldridge. With grateful thanks for her public service as a member of Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council for the Northern ward for 8 years. Ian Tilbury. With grateful thanks for his public service as a member of Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council for the Overton, Laverstoke and Steventon and Whitchurch, Overton and Leverstoke wards for 19 years. Right, I will now move on to 3 long service awards. Please remain seated. This way. Easier. The first award goes to Mark Raffel, the Long Service Award with grateful thanks and recognition. Agenda item number 5, questions to the council. I believe we have Mr. French. Would you like to step up and present your question to the council?
So I didn't stand up, sorry.
Yes, please.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. In the news released on the 9th of June, Councillor Izzet stated that there was no current plans to dispose of the 1.94 acre strip in the freehold ownership of the council, currently leased for a remainder of 30 years to Basingstoke Town Limited, owned by Mr. Razak. Can Councillor Izzet confirm that this lease, which covers part of the playing pitch, spectator area and the only vehicle access to the ground, has a term linking continuance to the usage of the ground for sport? And should not the council be proactive in disposing of this land, which could be pivotal in the redevelopment of the Camrose, even if not part of Basron's planning application, and which could generate funds for the benefit of residents? Otherwise, the land is unlikely to have any practical value and create a cost to maintain. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Isaac.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Mr. French.
Oh, sorry.
Right, I'll start again, I think. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Mr. French. The lease from this council to Basingstoke Town Limited includes a term that the property is to be used as a football ground only, or for such other purposes as may be sanctioned or approved from time to time in writing by the landlord, i.e. this council. The council as landlord has no ability to proactively bring the lease to an end without the agreement of Basingstoke Town Limited. It is for Basingstoke Town Limited in their capacity as lessee to approach the council should they desire to bring the lease to an end on appropriate terms to be agreed with the council to potentially facilitate other uses and forms of development and enable realisation of a potential council receipt. I would reaffirm that the council's land is not within the Basron application area, and other forms of use development would in most cases require planning permission. I would suggest that the council's land is not pivotal to the redevelopment of the Camrose, since the Basron land has been granted planning upon appeal as a standalone development.
You have 1 minute.
Officers have asked and are awaiting for Hampshire County Council as highway authority to confirm to the council unequivocally that they do or do not require the use of any part of the council's land at the Camrose for potential future road link associated with the improvements to Brighton Hill roundabout, as this impacts on the council's ability to dispose of the whole of its land interests at the Camrose. The cost of maintenance of the council's land is the responsibility of Basingstoke Town Limited in accordance with the lease.
Mr. French, do you have a supplementary question? If you would stand up, please.
Surely the council will link to any continuance of the lease of the strip to the requirement that football sport continues at the Camrose, in which case the Basron closure to football should mean the Basron lease automatically falls. Can the council confirm that this is the position? If the council has lost the lease, they should get a copy from Basron.
Councillor Isaac.
Right. So I think the question that is being asked is, can we bring the lease to an end? And I don't think we can bring the lease to an end at the moment. So that's the position.
Fine. Thank you very much. Move on to agenda item number 6, petitions. Councillor Basham, I understand you have a petition.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm delighted to bring this petition to Council today. It marks a significant point in challenging the introduction of parking charges at East Rock Park. I have resisted these changes from the beginning. Charging to park at local park crosses a Rubicon. Access to public space should be free. The health benefits of outdoor space are well documented. The pandemic has shown us how vital easy and free access to green space is. This issue is one of the reasons I stood for election. Last year I said to my local councillors, enough is enough. This council must start listening. There is strong sense in the community that the council does not listen to public opinion. Here in my hand, there are 2,240 people that are asking you to listen. I live in Norden, which has a deficit of green space. It has no park, so residents use Eastrock Park. My family use the park. My 10-year-old daughter and I cycle to the park, then my wife drives to collect her and her bike because she's not yet strong enough to cycle safely back up the hill. Without free short-stay parking, my daughter would not get to practice her cycling. Bob lives in Norden. He's about 60 and has CPOD, a serious pulmonary condition that affects his breathing. His doctor encourages a daily walk. Bob used to park at Eastrop and walk around the ponds every morning for his daily exercise. Just the threat of parking charges meant that Bob stopped his daily walk. No substitution was made. I explained the charges had not started yet while the council waits to consider this petition. So Bob is walking again at the park, for now. Last weekend, Eve, a mental health nurse, signed the petition and explained to me what a lifeline the park was after the birth of her child. On maternity pay, a reduced income, she said that being able to use the park and get outdoors in those early postnatal days was vital to her mental health. She was quite convinced that it made the difference between her staying well and not tipping into postnatal depression. The Scouts used the park. Craig Harris, Assistant District Commissioner of the Cubs, told me, Eastrock Park is a useful venue for us as it's central, easily accessible and offers a space for a wide range of activities to our local groups. With the introduction of parking charges, our parents who are dropping off and collecting young people will find it more difficult, and the parking charges will mean that our volunteer leaders incur costs to run activities for our young people. As a result of this, if parking charges are enforced, we are discouraged from using Eastrock Park. There are lots of similar stories from Eastrock, from Norden, from South Ham, from Brookvale, from Winklebury, from Brighton Hill, and so on. This proposal first surfaced last summer. The Council's Equalities Assessment said that the charges discriminated against those on low incomes. I objected in October, along with 132 others and 85 members of the Model Boat Club, so approximately 200 objections. The proposal was revised with lower charges and a new statement of reasons to better manage the car parks. The funds were allocated to better manage the car parks. The Council said that it had listened and believed the new proposals strike a fair balance. The new charges proposed were designed to be, I quote, less discriminatory. Discrimination is an absolute. You cannot be less discriminatory. A balance is a lever with equal weight on each side. This proposal is way out of balance. So I objected again. So did 80 others. 99% objected. 1 was in favour. This led to the Gazette running the withering headline, users of Basingstoke Park criticised Borough Council for introducing parking charges supported by just one person. This petition has significant support, cross-party. 2,240 signatories include councillors in this chamber from Labour, Councillor McCormick, Councillor Howard Sorrell and Councillor Lee, from the Liberal Democrats, Councillor Bales and Councillor Mackay, and from the Basingstoke and Dean Independents, all of the councillors here. Apologies
1 minute.
if I have missed anyone. I am grateful for their support. We must work cross-party on issues that matter to residents. So we urge the Council to review this decision in light of significant objection for a third time. Please come up with a solution that does not penalise those on low incomes, particularly carers and the infirm, many of them women, childminders, mums, disproportionately women. Our Council can be better than this. Residents expect better than this. If there is a problem, let us address the problem, not penalise the many for the sins of the few. So today, we, the undersigned, with the support of Eastrock and Grove and Norden Ward councillors and the Women's Equality Party, request that the Council reviews the new parking charges at Eastrock Park. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Basham, which I believe is your maiden speech. And if you could deliver this petition, if you come down, and
Sure.
Jack Grounds will pick it up from you. And it will be delivered to the appropriate departments in the council. Thank you very much. Move on to agenda item number 7, resignations and appointments. Do we have any resignations and reappointments? We have none. Move on to agenda item number 8, the capital programme outturn. Recommendation from a cabinet meeting. Councillor Isaac, will you be speaking to this?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you say, it's the capital programme outturn report for 21-22. This report to the financial year end states that our capital expenditure for the year was 15.972 million. This signifies substantial investment in a wide range of facilities important to our residents, including a contribution to modernising Oakley Cricket Club facilities, improvements to allotments at Sylvester Close, Norden, with better disabled access, extra funding for EV charging points, funding of CCTV equipment at council recycling sites to deter fly tippers. As I comment in my foreword to the report, it is, however, disappointing and not acceptable that the report reveals an underspend of 24.39%, or 5.126 million. This means that projects programmed to be delivered for our residents' benefits have been delayed. In another year impacted hugely by COVID, there are extenuating circumstances. Lockdowns have made it incredibly difficult for our officers to source supplies, contractors and consultants in a timely way, and I hope that fellow councillors will recognise this tonight. There have also been instances of poor workmanship by contractors causing payment to be delayed, appropriately, as at Popley Islands West. This is a problem affecting local government generally. In its recent report on local authority capital expenditure in England, the provisional outturn expenditure for 2021-22 for councils was 83% of forecast expenditure. That was a report by the Levelling Up department. We need to do better, and this has been discussed with senior officer leadership team. Correct profiling of capital programmes needs to be improved. Also, the new finance system introduced in April will allow greater detail on how schemes are progressing against expected activity. These will be reported to our regular capital programme board meetings to decide on any actions required. Project managers will be more accountable for performance of their projects. This report proposes a number of veerments or transfers, including funding to replace CSPO's petrol cars with electric vehicles and a new £280,000 capital scheme in 22-23 for more EV charging points taken from our climate change reserve. Looking ahead, this council continues to plan major investments in projects in the years ahead that will provide the improved infrastructure and housing needed for a growing and more elderly population, and one committed to combating the effects of climate change. To 25-26, we plan over £117 million of capital expenditure in our borough. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Isaac. Councillor James, followed by Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree, it's very disappointing. We are noting failure to deliver what we promised. I appreciate that COVID was an issue. It's been an issue for a few years. We should have had workarounds. Remember, once upon a time, when we had procurement problems, we could call on our European friends and neighbours and freely move goods and services around. Apparently that's harder now. I'm not sure why the B word's been taken out of this. But it is very concerning because this isn't the first time we've sat here looking at a capital outturn report showing delayed, rephased, etc. It's not new. What's really concerning is planning for the future, £2.9 million delayed spend. At what point does planning for the future become the dealing with today budget? Because you can't keep putting off the future. Even more concerning, perhaps, is we still haven't spent the money on the 5G innovation hub. Now, when we started this journey, 5G was an innovation. We all sat in this chamber with our 4G phones thinking, 5G, how exciting, streaming Netflix through a council meeting on my mobile phone, can't wait. We're now talking 6G. I read a speech, as everyone must, from our Culture Secretary, Nadine Dorries, very interesting lady, and she's talking about 6G. John Isaac is still getting round to 5G. So I'm afraid this council is slower than Nadine Dorry is. That's a really sad state of affairs. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor James. Councillor Isaac, I'm taking it your presentation is a proposal for acceptance of this report. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Simon Bound, thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. All I can say is thank God Nadine Dorries isn't standing for the leadership of the Tory party. God help us if that was the case. There's enough trouble as it is. In terms of the papers, I totally respect the work that officers are doing to try to address the issues that are present here in terms of the underspend and the lack of progress on so many of the projects. I totally and utterly respect that. However, it doesn't change the fact that it's a quarter of the budget that is the underspend. That is a huge and significant issue, because those projects and those areas that are going to suffer because of that actually will be impacted by inflation. We're going to see a significant impact on those budgets beyond where we are currently or where we thought we were going to be. Now that, of course, is going to take money out of the hands of the public and money out of the hands of our residents, who were expecting those projects to be delivered, who were expecting to benefit from those projects. And the reason why that's important is because of what we're doing in the future years. Now, if we take, for example, the argument that COVID has had a major impact, and I totally respect that, it is not the only issue out there that's the reason why this is an underspend. It is nonetheless one of them. I respect that. It's not the only one. You are then piling that £5 million into next year, on top of wanting to deliver £43 million worth of capital expenditure next year, and we couldn't even get the 20 million out the door this year. Therefore, the pressure to meet the demands of spending that money and delivering those capital projects is huge. So we need to have confidence that the council's processes and procedures are in place so that we do not see next year a 25% fall off in that budget. And we're not stood here saying the same things again next year, but not to 5 million, but 11 million. Think about it in the context of those residents that want to see that long list on page 3 here on the very budget item, because we spent more. And I'm sure if you look at that list of 147, you will see just how many of our wards are directly affected by that particular budget item. Just one particular example. So, Mr. Mayor, I just think we need to get a grip of this. I respect the officers and the Cabinet member is saying they are. And one final thought, if we're going to put EV charging points in, not work and has not worked for nearly.
Councillor McCormick.
Pidge. I asked that very question at Cabinet actually, and I wanted to ask what inflation was said and give the rest of the council the same answer. Picking up on electric vehicle charging, £281,000. We're going to have half the borough owning electric cars by 2025 if national trends come to fruition. That's just a drop in the ocean. We should be spending far more than that. We should be getting government to give us money if we haven't got it ourselves. And on the issue of play areas, yes, I've seen the list. I'm very pleased to say that 2 out of the 3 that have been done this year are in Brighton Hill. And we've got several more in Brighton Hill that need doing. Unfortunately, Brighton Hill has lost out on play area maintenance because we didn't have SIL funding or Section 106, unlike other wards, which was used to maintain play areas. When I look at other more fortunate places like Popley and Brookvale that have had play areas, 50,000, 100,000 a pop, I'm very pleased to say that Brighton Hill is going to get that investment. And I would want to expedite the rest of them, 147 players. We used to have a lot more than that. Sadly, they were axed, a lot of them, 20 years ago. But when we're looking at a national obesity strategy, and we all need to do more to lose weight, I would like to see more play areas to get children out exercising and forming the habits of a lifetime. But yeah, if we could have a response on the inflation mitigation measures for that 5 million slippage and prevention of accumulation of more slippage funds, we'd all be most grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCormick. Councillor Basham.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just 147 playgrounds, at 3 a year. I think we're doing 3 this year. I think it's 49 years to deliver those. Thank you.
I know the speakers at the moment. Councillor Bound, you seconded this. Do you want to speak now or reserve it?
I'll speak now, if I may, Mr. Mayor. I'm sure Councillor Isaac will respond to all of the questions. The only piece of information that I wanted to add is on the slippage list. The most significant item is £1.9 million, which is the Basingview 5G Living Lab. And I just wanted to share with the Chamber that I raised that specifically with the local enterprise partnership, who we're delivering this in partnership with, and they confirmed that it is progressing. It is now progressing very quickly. And to reassure people that, of course, 5G is not meant to be about mobile phones, even though Vodafone and the like may encourage us to believe that it is, and that the Living Lab in Basingview is still cutting edge.
Thank you. I have no more speakers. Councillor Isaac, do you want to sum up?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I said in my opening remarks that we need to do better. I think that perhaps some of the speakers tonight rather underestimate the difficulties that have been encountered by officers because of the huge impact of and the disruption caused by COVID. Capital projects, by their very nature, are complicated, and it's quite difficult to predict accurately when they're going to complete. And in fact, some of the issues may not be that great, in as much that the slippage may be quite modest into this current financial year. On the play areas overspend, I'm not sure that it's actually the case that means there'll be less spend in this financial year, and I'd like to come back to the council on that, if I may. On the memory test that I got from Councillor McCormack, you've got me. So and we haven't got the Section 123 officer here tonight, so we can't turn to her to give the councillors the benefit of the answer that we had at Cabinet. And I think it seems to me to be rather unfair to put that question to Sue Kirvan's deputy. But if he's willing to have a go at it, then perhaps he'd do so after I've finished. I'm very happy that this issue should continue to be scrutinised, but I do think we should have a sense of proportion about this year's outturn. It has been incredibly difficult, and I'm confident that next year we will get much closer. I think it's very rarely the case that you actually spend what you've budgeted to spend on capital projects in any year. And that's true across local government. But let's say we're going to make a big effort to get a lot closer and much better than a margin of 25% gap. All right.
Thank you, Councillor Isaac. No, speaking is finished with the summing up of the proposer. I'm now going to go through the recommendations from the Cabinet meeting that are on the update paper. I'm not going to read them all out, but I think we all can see them, that the Council requests Council to note, and that's items 1 through 7. That's for noting by the Council. However, Cabinet requests Council to approve items 8, 9 and 10. Can we take those and agree those by Council? Agreed? Thank you. Those are duly approved. I move on to agenda item number 9, Revenue Outturn Report. And I believe Councillor Isaac will be speaking to this as well.
Indeed, Mr. Mayor. So this is the Revenue Outturn Report for 2021-22. This report for the financial year end to 2022 records an overall surplus of £1.01 million compared to the budget approved by Council in February 2021 of £32.97 million after carry forwards and movements to reserves. This report recommends carry forwards for government grants received late to a COVID-19 grants carry forward reserve to be spent this financial year, including on cyber resilience and infrastructure development at Manydown. The report recommends Council agrees to year-end transfers to the budget carry forward reserve of 1.01 million for local plan work, planning department staff resourcing and east of Basingstoke work, as well as to a new £1 million cost of living assistance. This surplus allows us to provide financial help to our most needy residents fund, COLAF. It is aimed at £100 or £1,000, geared to 3 bands of income will be made via vouchers, or our officers are preparing to launch the scheme of £1,000 from the MTF income caused by COVID. I'm not aware of any of them. I'm pleased also in this year the unused councillor grants from last year with advice and support on cost of living issues. Allocation will be in line with the existing rules for programme challenges of the pandemic, as well as the new ones arising from inflation, supply and personnel shortages and a major war in Europe. We have a first-class...
Thank you, Councillor Isaac. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Bounds, do you wish to speak now or reserve? Right, Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Can I welcome the creation of the Cost of Living Assistance Fund to those residents of our borough who are at the moment facing serious dire straits. And £1 million will make a difference. I think the issues that we are seeing in our wards that residents are facing is the tip of the iceberg, to put it bluntly. In this document on page 68, we refer to the energy costs being £2,359 on average. We now know that in October, a 64% rise on top of the existing rise is going to hit residents again. That's going to take the average bill way past £3,000 per household. Now, I don't know about you, but if you think about that being a third of a pensioner credit income for the entire year, we are talking about an impact our residents cannot sustain. And I don't know when government is genuinely going to get the message that even though it thinks it's doing what it's doing, it isn't going to scratch the surface of what people are going through. We need to support our food banks. We need to support all of those agencies that are out there right now making a difference to our residents and ensure that they have the resources, the ability to meet the challenge that's coming this coming winter. Because I am concerned that residents who are in crisis right here, right now, this summer, are going to be far deeper in crisis because of what is coming by the time we get to Christmas. We have got to do what we can. So I'm really pleased to see this fund. I welcome it. It will make a difference, but there are a number of points I would just like us to consider. First of all, the first come, first serve element to it. There are many residents who perhaps would benefit far more from a targeted scheme, and I do not know whether that is possible or not, but I think it's important to consider that. Simply having a first come, first serve doesn't mean that those who are most in need get the support they require. It is often the case that those who are most in need are also put off by complicated application processes. And we need to think very carefully about the administration of this fund such that people who would struggle to make an application process, struggle with paperwork and processes, are supported to make an application in the first place. So knowing that the fund exists, the advertisement of the fund, the marketing of the fund is critical, as much as having the staff and the capacity to help people make an application and access the fund. I think that's really important. I also note the point in the paperwork on page 92 of the split. 25% of the award can be with to support food and the remaining 75% to support utility costs. I just think there needs to be some sensitivity to individual circumstance. Instead of arbitrary lines that we draw in percentage terms of what you can and cannot, let's just think through if an application comes in from somebody who is in real need, in the context in which their need is set, we understand that and we can use the fund to support them. Let's just think about some flexibility built into this so that we do not see people go without. And as I say, this is great. This is a big step along the way, and we are a council that is doing this, and I welcome it. However, the government have got a massive role to play in this, so I invite my colleagues opposite, please think about who you vote for, because that new Prime Minister, and my goodness me, when they get control of this particular agenda, has got one of the biggest crises I think any Prime Minister will have ever had on their doorstep. And how they deal with it for the people of our borough will be a real test, I think, of the views of our borough, perhaps, on what politics means to them and what difference politics can make to them. Because when you're in crisis, it doesn't matter. You're in crisis because you can't pay your rent, you can't put food on the table, and you are not going to be able to pay your energy bills later this year because they're just not going to be able to do it. So what do we do when they're in arrears? And what do we do when they're in absolute need for more? But this £1 million will make a difference, I think, to start with. It's a question now of just making sure it gets to the right people. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Councillor McCormick.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Well, Councillor Harvey and I appear to be overlapping in what we want to say. I am very pleased that we have managed to find £1 million for a cost of living assistance fund, which was under the working title Hardship Fund. We discussed it at group leaders. Very pleased to see that it's going to, subject to approval tonight, start helping people straight away. It will make a difference. It will not make the whole difference. Now, I appreciate none of us in this room will be eligible to vote until the last stage of the Tory party leadership contest, and even then you have to be a member of the Tory party to do that. But I think, from my recollection, it's only one of the candidates has advocated a cut of VAT on fuel to zero, and that's Penny Mordaunt. That's a policy that Labour, the Lib Dems and the SNP have all been banging on about for months. It's just common sense. It will mitigate. If you've got a £3,000 fuel bill at the end of the year, that's a significant saving on that, up to 20% off it. So, I would hope that that would be the case. The £1,000 on the lowest incomes or £200 on what appears to be still below the median salary, well, on average, people are £800 a year worse off this year compared to last year. And in Basingstoke and Dean, we've got nearly 13,000 people suffering from serious financial difficulty. Petrol has gone up by over 30% since the start of the year. Most people's domestic fuel bills will have virtually doubled. And by the new year, they'll have doubled again. Now, that's unsustainable. And, while this goes a little way towards that, and I welcome that, I can't help thinking that we might have to come up with some more initiatives in the new budget, or maybe have an emergency budget later on in the year, because our residents are really suffering out there. There's no two ways about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCormick. Councillor Kuznetsko, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Like the other councillors, I'm also really pleased to see the Cost of Living Assistance Fund included in the report. We all know from our casework just how challenging managing personal finances and household finances can be at the moment. So it's really good to see that we've recognised that there's something we can do locally here to make a difference, and we're not just leaving it to national government, which is in limbo at the moment. Now, one specific element of this new grant scheme is that it's not given out automatically. People need to apply for it. So that means it's absolutely vital that we promote it properly. And by that I mean we look beyond our usual channels of social media. Facebook, Twitter, the normal channels that we use a lot as a council make sense. They reach a certain audience very effectively, and they're normally pretty cost effective as well, which is why I think a number of us in this chamber use it ourselves for our own campaigning. But for something as important as this, we need to look beyond social media. We've been quite creative in developing this fund. As I said right at the start, we've not left it to central government to do everything. We've taken the step ourselves. And I think, given how important this is, we also need to be very creative about how we promote this, how we make sure that the people most in need are aware of this funding. And that's the message I wanted to pass on to Cabinet today to make sure that that's taken forward.
Thank you. Councillor Mackay.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just in the context of the cost of living crisis, the item I'd like to welcome is quite small, but the item to be welcomed is the creation of the one-off grant scheme to support organisations providing cost of living support advice. As noted, this, I believe, stems from the motion that I raised and was seconded by Councillor Bowles in February. And really what I'd like to do now is thank the councillors around the chamber who supported that motion. It passed unanimously. It's allowed the Cabinet to do the right thing by the intent of the motion. And finally, I'd like to thank the officers who did the work to provide the mechanism and allow it to happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Basham.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just had a point of clarification on how it's going to work. The Appendix 2 says that the person claiming the support has to make the claim unless they're got someone on their behalf, such as a relative or social worker. I don't know if anyone in the chamber is able to answer, but are councillors able to help their residents in this context?
Thank you for that. And Councillor Fillimore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think Councillor Mackay has covered what I was going to say to some extent, that the 60,000 underspend has been carried forward, but that's going to be used for an advice service rather than being ward specific to take up the slack for the £2,000 that weren't used by each individual councillor last year. And perhaps the Cabinet member could clarify.
Yeah. Councillor Minhap, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I wholeheartedly welcome this need of the hour program that is proposed by Cabinet. Mr. Mayor, we are going to support families around up to 5,000 families with this fund. So one thing that I would like Cabinet to consider one is, there are 3 cohorts decided here. One is 0 to 15K, another one is 15K to 20K, and 20K to 25K. I'm just looking at the Basingstoke figures on this, Mr. Mayor, here. The lower quartile Basingstoke figure, average salary is 25,000. If that is true, only very few families will be qualified for this fund. And given that 0 to 15K salary, with the increased hourly pay, national wage, that means only one in the family needs to work and no one else needs to work, then only they'll be qualified for this 1,000. So would they please consider to increase this limit with respect to the national wage increase? Then it will be applicable for more and more families. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Howard Cyril.
Mr. Mayor, I'm reading out a statement on behalf of Councillor Lee. Is that all right?
Could I stand up, please?
I just wanted to confirm beforehand. Yeah. Are you happy for me to read out?
Yes, read out the statement.
Thanks. Mr. Mayor, councillors, I would like to apologise for not being able to participate in tonight's council meeting. Unfortunately, after 2 years of successfully managing to avoid catching it, I recently tested positive for COVID and I'm feeling a little under the weather. In the hope that these words can be read out on the night by a fellow group member, I will be watching at home. Had I been present this evening, I would have requested to speak to give my support to the creation of the grant scheme to provide support to the many residents across my ward of Winklebury and Manydown, and also Basingstoke, who will suffer from the cost of living crisis that has been left to fester for too long. Over the last 12 years of Conservative government, our economy has suffered and wages have stagnated. Energy bills, already sky high, continue to rise. Inflation is at a record high of 9.1%, the highest it has been since 1982. And new research from Bristol University and the Financial Fairness Trust suggests that 1 in 6 households are in serious financial difficulty. Across Basingstoke, this means that nearly 13,000 households could potentially need this help, so it is welcome news that we, as a council together, can work towards helping our residents. I do have a few questions that I would hope to receive answers for throughout tonight, and I apologise if they have already been answered ahead of this being read out. I wonder firstly if the leader of the council can detail to us councillors, who will inevitably receive contacts from residents, how we direct people to the support they need and what expected turnaround times we can expect to see with this scheme. I would hate to see residents face further financial hardship as they wait for vital funds to be released to them. Secondly, I'm wondering if we could also use this opportunity to provide further help, guidance and signposting to those in most need to ensure that they are receiving all the relevant support that they can, depending on their individual circumstances. Lastly, as a veteran of the armed forces, it would be remiss to not mention the nearly 70,000 veterans that may be in receipt of universal credit And I would ask the Mayor, as our Armed Forces champion, if he feels he has the capacity to support and resources from both officers here in the Council and also from the Government to ensure that no veteran goes without during this cost of living crisis. I welcome the creation of this help and hope all councillors present tonight can vote this through. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. That's the last question. I'm going to ask the seconder if, or the proposer to this. Sorry, missed you on that. Councillor Swain, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Many of you will know that I've been very heavily supporting our advice services over the last 40 years nearly, and it's a very opportune moment at the moment that we're going to actually put this new fund forward. I'm very pleased that it's been allocated to something that's so pressing. Some of you may already be aware, and I don't know whether the Cabinet are, that there is already a fund that is supplied via Hampshire County Council, which was given to the county and unitaries by the DWP, which is called the Household Support Fund. And that is running from April this year until September 22. And I'm advised that the criteria that is used is very similar to the one that's now been proposed, although the salary bands are slightly different. However, that is being administered by our local citizens' advice, for example, and again, they meet all the criteria and they help people who otherwise possibly couldn't claim. Because as many people say, there are people who aren't computer literate or physically have not got the capabilities of applying for what they need. I think the Cabinet did mention that there was officers going to be put aside to deal with this. I would hope that they would look to the partnerships of people that are already doing this work and have all that information from people and are able to gather that information in the future. That will help, because I am conscious that people might get confused. So we do need to do some very clear messaging to make sure that people understand what grant they can apply for. If they apply for 2 lots of grants, would they be eligible, or would the 2 partners have to speak to each other? There are lots of things that can be done, but we need to do it properly to make sure that people do get, indeed, the help they need. I'm conscious, I'm sure most of you are, any of you that are school governors, that the number of people, children asking for free school meals, the number of people that are already struggling with energy costs and cost of living, the number of people rising at our food banks in the town and obviously in the villages are gradually growing all the time. One wonders where it will end. And just as a final point, while we are good at giving people grants to help them with the cost of their energy now, what are we going to do in the future? Because this will not end next September, next April. It will carry on. And we need to think very carefully how we make sure that people have homes that are using less consumption of energy in the future, because it isn't a short-term thing. I'm absolutely sure this will carry on for some time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Your maiden speech. Now, I'll try again. No more speakers. Councillor Bound, would you like to sum up and maybe answer 1 or 2 of the questions? And just before you start, you asked a question of me as the Armed Forces champion of this council. I attended a tripartite group of Armed Forces champions covering Rushmore, Hart and this district less than 2 weeks ago. And the subject was brought up then, and all the resources and contacts that we have for veterans across those 3 districts, very conscious that veterans should not be left behind. And so I know that all those networks are working and making sure that those veterans are aware of the kind of support that is available. Councillor Bound.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. What I'll do is I'll second, if I may, and I'll leave Councillor Isaac to sum up. Which is just to say, and I've said it to the Chamber and my colleagues before, that we are absolutely focused on understanding the impact of the cost of living for our residents. I think we've said in this chamber before, and to our colleagues in meetings like group leaders, that this is the first of the initiatives that we've created, but we will be keeping an eye on it developing other schemes. I absolutely hear issues about being more targeted. I absolutely hear issues about whether this is enough money. We are very fortunate to be able to have money aside for a rainy day, and I don't think we can deny it is absolutely pouring at the moment as far as cost of living. I welcome all of my colleagues sharing their ideas and encourage them to do it so that we can take all of those into account as we develop new schemes. Of course, we will be working with our partners. I think we all understand the value of partners and how closely our officers work with people like Citizens Advice and how they really help people to apply for these schemes and make sense of things that can sometimes seem very complicated. We will, of course, be looking at all of our channels to make sure we get that information out there in a way that is digestible. Again, these things can be very confusing. And to Councillor McCormick, I will pass on your best wishes to Penny Mordaunt on her campaign to become leader of the Prime Minister. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bound. It's been properly moved and seconded. Excuse me? I'm sorry, I've got to go back to the proposer for summing up, but before I call the vote.
Just as a clarification in relation to the question, can councillors support people to these applications?
Councillor Isaac will cover that particular issue in his summing up. Councillor Isaac.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, I'm delighted that there's so much support in this chamber for this initiative. I think it's a demonstration of this council at its best. I think Councillor Harvey made some very good points, and it's often the case that those who are most in need of this sort of help are the ones who are at most disadvantage in actually accessing it. And so I take that point, and we'll talk to the officer team to see what we can do to ensure that we try and reach those people. I'm thinking particularly in my part of Basingstoke, a rural area, where there are a lot of people who are suffering from rural poverty, to use a phrase, and don't have access to the internet and so forth, don't have bank accounts, and so it's very important that we look at how we're going to reach those people to make sure that they can access this scheme. Your other point, Councillor Harvey, about demonstrating some flexibility between the 25% for food and the 75% towards utility costs. Yes, I think we need to look at that, and so I'll encourage the officers to do that. Councillor Basham and Councillor Laura James, you've asked can councillors assist in the application process, and the answer is yes, you can. So I'm sure others who are acting on behalf of residents will be given the opportunity to put forward applications on behalf of residents. Councillor Mamalina, I'm not sure about your calculations. They may be right, but on the average median income in the borough. But let's just say that if we find we've got money left over, then we'll look at the eligibility rules. But I would be pretty certain that we are going to be able to get that £1 million out to needy residents. But we'll look at that point as if it arises. Councillor Slimming, I'm confident that we've got a team a finance team that's really well practiced in applying these sort of grants. We've had a lot of experience of this as a result of the government COVID grants, and so I think we'll keep up our performance on that. I think that probably covers the comments on COLAF. But generally, as Councillor Bound says, we do realise that this is a crisis, and as an administration, we will continue to keep under review what we can do as a council to help our residents. I've got no ability to control what goes on in Westminster, but happily we can do. We have got the ability to make decisions in this borough. And then just on the councillor grant scheme, Councillor Phillimore, no, it's not ward specific. It's going to be £60,000 that will be available for organisations across the borough to apply for in support of those giving advice in relation to the cost of living problems that we've got. Okay? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Isaac. Now, the recommendation from the Cabinet is that the Council approves recommendations 6 to 9. They're itemised on the update paper in the agenda, under this agenda item. I get the sense there's a measure of agreement. Are we agreed on those items? Thank you very much, Council. Move on to the Treasury Management Annual Report. A report of the Executive Director of Corporate Services. I'm moving this particular report from the Chair.
I'm happy to second it, Chair, Mr. Mayor.
And the Deputy Mayor will second it. Do I have approval? Thank you very much. And move on now to agenda item number 11, the Standards Committee Annual Report specifically. Again, I will move that from the Chair.
I'm happy to move it, Mr. Chair. Second it.
Thank you. It's moved and seconded. Is this approved? Agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Agenda item number 12, Corporate Performance Monitoring Scorecard. Report from the Leader of the Council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I didn't really want to add anything because we have clearly seen this report before, but just to add on my thanks to the Scrutiny Committee for not only their comments that we received in March, but also the additional comments that we received at the 21st of June's meeting, and recommend it to the Council. Thank you.
Do I have a seconder? Do I have a second?
Not second.
No. Councillor Ganesh. Is that second? You're seconding? Do you want to speak now or reserve?
Reserve the right to speak, Mayor. Thank you.
Councillor Ganesh.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to draw everyone's attention to a single line, but a very important line on the scorecard, and that's the target of planting new trees, which you'll find at the top of the third page of the pull-out in the main agenda pack. So as you'll see, we've got a target of planting 400 new trees this municipal year, which sounds pretty good, until you factor in that we felled 504 trees last year, 461 the year before that, 673 the year before that, and 1,174 in 2018-19. So in fact, in each of the past 7 municipal years, we've cut down more than 400 trees. And in fact, if you add up the complete total over the period, we've lost a net 5,000 trees in the borough in the past 7 years. So the 400 new trees target means that we're likely to see a continued reduction in our net tree population here in our borough over the coming years. And that just seems to be completely at odds with both our climate emergency and our ecological emergency. Now, I appreciate that the analysis, the numbers I've given you are perhaps slightly oversimplistic. The numbers don't take into account the fact that a lot of trees are self-seeding, and also we've got lots of wonderful volunteer groups in our borough who plant trees themselves. Those aren't included. And equally, we have to recognise the fact that some trees are cut down for a good reason. We have storm damage. We had storms earlier on this year which have necessitated trees to be cut down. And also as a councillor for one of our newer wards, we've had trees which were planted in the wrong location decades ago, which are now threatening people's houses or encroaching onto their gardens. So they've had to go. Nonetheless, I would argue that the 400 target is too low, and I believe that we need to raise that higher or look at making it a net rather than a gross target. So for that reason, and in line with our ecological and climate emergencies, I'm going to be voting against this and asking for it to go back to scrutiny to have that section looked at again.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is just worth saying on the trees, and we've debated this in this chamber before, that actually a number of our wards do not have the tree canopy that we set a target for. So it's a very exemplary point that we don't meet the targets already, despite the desire to plant as many trees. And I'm going to be really controversial for once. I'd like to thank the county council. I don't often do that. I'm going to feel very ill after doing it, I'm sure, given the number of things they do. I'm going to say I need a doctor. No, you can't get a doctor, Gavin. That's one of the major problems our residents face, unfortunately, getting access to GPs. We'll come back to that, I'm sure, in another debate in another place very, very soon. In all seriousness, the county council has enabled us in Norden to plant nearly 200 trees. And that's with resident support. And it has made a massive difference. And it's actually been really, really welcomed. One of the issues they faced was trying to find the places to plant the trees because of the services underneath their own verges that they couldn't plant them on. So that hampered us in a number of spots. But we do need to take the issue seriously. But what that shows, and this is the major point I wanted to make, was aside from the work that the borough does, and the borough does plant trees, it's not that we just don't plant enough, is that this came to scrutiny, and cross-party, there was a very good debate. I think it was one of the best debates I've taken part in quite a while, where we challenged and pushed in the right way that scrutiny should on a number of these targets. And one of the things that stands out is, for example, we pushed the point about planning. Now, our planning officers are delivering nearly 90% rate return at the moment. That's a really good target that they're meeting. Yet in here, we're going to set them a target of 80%. It was originally even lower than that. So why set a target below what you're delivering to achieve really, in a sense, you're not, because you're already there, you've surpassed it. Where's the stretch in that? Where's the challenge in that? And that kind of reflects, I think, a lot of these particular corporate targets. And that was the main theme, I think, and colleagues can please correct me, that if we are going to have challenge and we're going to have a performance review in the sense, it needs to be stretching. And I think we just need to think about that. And I think we need to think about these particular targets and whether they're relevant to us in a corporate setting. So I think, yeah, there is a really good argument, perhaps, for having the performance panel set up again, to specifically look at the targets and specifically look at the list, as it were, and to come back to scrutiny with a suggestion of how it could be improved to be far more stretching than it is. And officers were really, they explained, we had a really good debate on it, and I want to thank officers for their work on it. But from a councillor perspective and a scrutiny perspective, I just think we can be better. So let's try and do that if we can, and work with our officers, work with scrutiny and improve this. So actually I do agree with Councillor Kishnechko, maybe this should go back to scrutiny for that very action to be undertaken.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Bowes.
Thank you, Chair. I, along with, I think, most of the other members of scrutiny, received an email today from Mr Paul Beavers regarding the improving biodiversity section on the scorecard. And if possible, I'd like to read out the what he planned to say. Unfortunately, he missed the deadline, if that's acceptable. He says, in the performance monitoring scorecard, the scrutiny committee commented very sensibly on hedgerows, biodiversity and water quality. Sadly, the importance of those comments have not been given sufficient regard. I will try to help. The scorecard for improving biodiversity is confusing, has little or no value, and lacks the granularity that I assume Scrutiny Committee were searching for. The lack of granularity which needs action today, not in 12 months or more, is largely hidden behind the catch-all measures in PED 04, increase in the amount of space, brackets, HA, of council open spaces managed for biodiversity interest. This term is meaningless at the best of times, but even more so when set against the backdrop of an ecological emergency where every habitat type is now a priority for restoration. Species are going extinct or numbers have plummeted and ecosystem services are breaking down. Great areas of public open space can and should be managed better, and we need to get on with it. We need an expedited audit of borough-owned open spaces and water to measure the extent, condition and opportunity for each habitat type. Connectivity too is vitally important. By improving knowledge of our habitats and acting to expand and improve them, we can act similarly on species, diversity and abundance, and by doing so we will be contributing towards restoring the ecosystem services we also need to audit. To conclude, to set useful targets, we have to have the baseline data to inform decisions about priorities and timescales, projects and funding, and against which change can be measured. We needed this yesterday. Better baseline data means better decisions, better targeted towards improvements, with change measured over time, whether annually or less regularly. We need a commitment to this now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Slimmon, please. No, did you not wish to speak? Councillor McCormack.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, much of what I wanted to say has already been touched upon. Some of these targets are very good. I mean, the collection rates, are excellent. Others do seem to lack sufficient detail or are not sufficiently challenging. For instance, FFD 12, to implement the strategic asset management plan, just says achieved. It doesn't really tell us very much about what went on. Picking up on climate change. Now, this is the bit where I think it's potentially quite confusing. PEAO 6, % reduction in council operational emissions as per climate change strategy. 2021-22, 3.396 tonnes carbon dioxide equivalent, provisional. 3,396 tonnes carbon dioxide equivalent. Against a target of less than or equal to 15%. Well, what is that in CO2 equivalent tonnes? Otherwise, the comparison's meaningless, can't do it. And also, if we're supposed to be reaching net zero by 2025, how does a 15% emission this year and next year bring us in line with that? Without the absolute figures, we can't be sure. And just picking up finally on the question of the trees, PED 08. Queen Silver Jubilee 1977, we planted many thousands of trees in the borough, and we're reaping the consequences of that some 45 years later, with trees planted close to houses and in parks in locations where I guess it simply wasn't envisaged the trees would grow that big, and the problem of maintaining the trees has grown with them. And we do regularly get tree fellings. We have did have a 5-year rolling programme. The last time it came around Brighton Hill, they had around 500 trees felled out of a total of 4,500. A lot of those trees were virtually falling down anyway. But nevertheless, the residents who had been asking for trees to be felled were quite upset to hear the total that had actually been felled. Be that as it may, I think it's incumbent on us to ask and get an accurate figure for how many trees actually are in the borough. And I don't know who could answer that question. But at a guess, I would say that in the total borough, bearing in mind that something like 91% of it is rural, we have between 500,000 and 1 million trees. So if we want to make a material difference in biodiversity by tree planting, planting 400 trees or 4,000 trees is not going to make a difference. It's not even going to be 1% of what we need to do. So if we're really serious about planting a lot more trees, we're going to have to plant many thousands of trees, and maybe even plant 1 million trees in the borough, and we'd have to figure out where we're going to plant them, because there's an awful lot of space required for that sort of number of trees. So I think I've probably talked all that to death now. I do agree that it should go back to scrutiny. Oh, one last thing. I've got a brand new series of indicators on supporting jobs and business growth. It doesn't actually tell us how many jobs we've had and what the growth of businesses are. Just things like number of visits to websites and things like that. Well, I can't really ascertain from that whether the economy is growing or shrinking, the number of jobs is growing or shrinking. So maybe this should go back to scrutiny and we have another look at it and come up with some better indicators. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCormack. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mayor. As Chair of Scrutiny, I believe it is coming back. We've got some of these coming back at the next meeting. I'm sure we're more than capable of looking at it again, because we did have a long debate about this. It was complicated. I won't say it isn't. I don't think it's as plain as it could be. That's what the scrutiny is there for. We will make recommendations where we see fit. More than happy to. But I'll leave it to the Cabinet what they wish to do.
Councillor Bound.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Slightly disappointed that the scrutiny doesn't believe that they've had long enough to discuss it, but absolutely, wholeheartedly supportive of, with such important performance criteria that I know everybody in this chamber supports, around our planning response, but especially around our biodiversity and our climate performance indicators, and also picking up the issue of the performance panel. I just really want to offer my support to Councillor Jones in his work as the Chair of Scrutiny, and more than happy to ask Councillor Eachus with her portfolio and Councillor Ganesh to work with a task and finish group or whatever the Scrutiny Committee decides to do, so that we can really bottom out what are very important bits of information regarding the performance of our council on issues that really matter.
Right, and we'll speakers. Councillor Ganesh, do you wish to speak now for seconding this motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've been used to the previous mayor until May. Apologies.
I'll forgive you once.
I'm happy to support this and wholeheartedly agree with Councillor Bound's comment about scrutiny is well placed to look through this, and we are as a committed council to deliver all the climate change or biodiversity commitments. I'm sure we should be able to look into if there's a way to find more detailed KPIs or more detailed way to analyse the performances, and happy to work with the officers on that. And in terms of the trees, completely agree with some of the comments made that we should probably do more, and we should be working to achieve, not just as a borough but as individual, the ward specific to deliver the best to achieve the overall commitment as a council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ganesh. If I could go back to the leader, can I take it that this report will go back to scrutiny, and then after scrutiny has dealt with it again, it will then be resubmitted to the council? Do I take that as the position that we're in at the moment?
I'm very happy with that position if the Chair of Scrutiny is, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Jones?
Yeah, I'm more than happy with it. We may have to reconvene rather than we've been doing it at scrutiny. We have a lot of work on, so we may reconvene a panel of some sort to really look at it and dig deep. But that's going to be up to the committee, not me. I may chair it, but I do believe you've got to get consent of everybody in the committee. But that's where I would think we may have to go.
And the councillor is content with that? Yes. Right. That agenda item was withdrawn. Yes, this is. I can replace the recommendation because we're noted to note the comments of the scrutiny committee and to approve it. We're not approving it. What we're doing is we're proving that it is returned to the scrutiny committee for further examination. Thank you very much. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. So we have to be precise of this on various matters. Right, move on to agenda item number 13, questions from members of the council on notice. And this is Councillor Phillimore.
As per the order paper, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. And Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member.
For asking this question. There are around 90 leases that have lapsed on the operational portfolio, of which 34 are small garden lease licences. 14 further leases are under review and in negotiation, which include the Scout huts and the Anvil, as well as 6 units at the Viables Craft Centre. 3 leases also remain outstanding at Shute House. Discussions will commence with the tenant shortly as plans for the future use and repairs of the building develop. The balance of 42 relates to community leases. 15 are being reviewed as part of the community building strategy with SLAs, but advice from legal is weighted on the remainder. It's worth highlighting that all the community leases are let on a peppercorn, save for those with a drinks bar. The delay has been as a result of resources and the development of the strategy for community development. The resources in property have been increased to work through the remaining leases and conclude those where heads of terms have been agreed. But I can assure Councillor Fullamore we'll keep a close eye on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Isaac. Councillor Fullamore, do you have a supplementary?
Yeah, sort of. I'm sure the Deputy Leader appreciates that some of these organisations need security of tenure to apply for and receive grants and other financial support, and that delay is not good in that respect. Could we have a list of how many expired leases there are and how long they've been expired? But most importantly, could this issue be placed on the agenda for consideration by CEP?
Councillor Isaac.
Yes, I understand the point that's being made in relation to applying for grants. I don't think there's any risk of any loss of security of tenure, but I agree that they do need the grants do need to be renewed if they're going to be able to get to apply for. The leases need to be renewed if organisations are going to be able to apply for grants. Yes, I'm sure we can provide a list of the expired leases, and if CEP are happy for it to go to. If the chair of CEP is happy for it to go to that committee, then absolutely no problem whatsoever in taking that to it.
Fine, thank you very much. Move on to agenda item number 14, questions to the chair of Cabinet and or committee. Are there any questions? And as per the update paper? No? Right, the next is agenda item number 17, an urgent item is dispensation consideration, a report of the Head of Law and Governance and Monitoring Officer. I will move this dispensation order, and do I have a second? Sure. Deputy Mayor will second this. I think we're all aware of what the item is. Are we agreed? Thank you very much. There being no further business, I close this meeting at 7:55. Thank you very much, members. Appreciate it.